There are moments in life that stay with us, not always the big, obvious ones, but the quiet conversations, the small acts of kindness, the people who showed up when we needed it the most. And sometimes without even realizing the impact they were having. And when you look back, you can often trace a thread to the one person who made the difference. So, in today's episode, we're going to explore exactly that because as parents, as carers, as adults in our children's lives, it's easy to wonder if what we're doing is enough, if the little things matter. But this conversation is a reminder that they really do. That one person, that one safe, steady, encouraging presence can change the direction of somebody's life. So I'm joined today by the gorgeous Sarah Vogel, friend of the show, and together we're going to reflect on the person who made a difference in her life, what they did, what it meant, and how that impact has stayed with her over time. And as you listen, I'd love for you to gently think about your own life too. Who was that person for you? And maybe who might you be that person for now? Hello, Sarah. How are you?
Hello, I'm very well, thank you. Yeah, I'm good. The sun's out, the sky is blue. I did check that before I said it, by the way. Just had a quick look at the window.
Amazing. Oh, thank you for joining us today. We always have plenty to talk about.
Mm.
But first of all, I want to just start off with when you think about your life, who is
Mhm.
the one person that really stands out for you for making a difference?
I had to think about this, and the person that came to my mind is someone that I had a conversation with in the maybe late 80s, probably was late 80s. Someone that I worked with and is still a dear friend of mine. And that is my friend, Dr. Elaine Swan. She's an academic and she is passionate about all sorts of things that have influenced me over my life. But maybe I'll start with the conversation that changed so much for me. So we knew each other. We were both shop girls by her own description. We worked in Selfridges in London in the 80s and 90s. And I remember her as being a supervisor in the hosiery department. So that's tights for those of us who aren't in their 60s. And I remember her wearing things like yellow tights. And she always stood out to me before I knew her because she had a kind of really unique style. And so I knew of her. Then she moved to the training department. And long story short, after I became a manager in two or three different departments after I was promoted, I was seconded into the training department. So I then worked in the same team as her. And she was always just a bright and brilliant person. So always very inspirational, I would say. And at that time, she was doing her master's as well. So she did a master's in management learning at Lancaster University and was working in our training department. And I can't remember how this conversation came up, but just for my history, Selfridges was my university. I went there at 19. I did A levels at school, but I didn't want any more academic stuff. I'd had enough. And she said to me one day in passing, "You should go to university. You'd absolutely love it." Now I was in my mid-20s at the time, and it had never occurred to me that I might be able to go to university because when you mess up your A levels, as I did quite gloriously, you don't think of yourself as very clever. And nobody had ever said to me, "You're bright, you're capable." I don't think, I can't remember. The closest I got was my English teacher saying you could get an A, but you won't even pass unless you read the books. So that tells you a bit about how I was back in the day. Anyway, so she said that to me and it planted a seed. And I certainly recall her being just treating me as if I was bright, as if I was clever. Anyway, so I had already done an A level. I did an A level after work in psychology in my own time, paid for by Selfridges. They were amazing back in the day. They used to pay for you to do things that were learning related. And I got a grade A out of nowhere. I applied myself better than I did when I was 18. And I think that was part of the conversation. You should go to university. Anyway, I applied to Birmingham University, which happened to be her alma mater. Anyway, she'd been to Birmingham, and so had my boss at the time. And I had a boyfriend who was in Birmingham when I lived in London. And so I knew the city, and I thought, I'll go to Birmingham. And I applied to one or two others, and I got in as a mature student. So, if that was the thing that triggered a massive change, I can say that when I went to uni, I'd thought that I would probably go back to London and probably try and get a job. But as it happened, I set up as a freelance trainer as soon as I left Selfridges. I became self employed, got loads of freelance stuff. By the time I graduated, I realized I wasn't going to go back to being employed. I was going to keep running this business. David and Elaine, actually, incidentally, were also fundamental in setting up PDA. And at that time, Elaine was still working in organisations, but she then later went on to become an academic. So went on to become an academic at Lancaster University, did her PhD up there. So just a bit of history on her. So PDA was set up and I never did go back to London. I met somebody, we got married, I had my daughter. I still live in Birmingham today, 32 years on. I'm still friends with Elaine. And I 100% would not have even thought about going to university had she not said that to me. And you can see how that domino effect, dunk, 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 led to much of what we're doing today in PDA. So that's the first thing. There's lots of other ways in which she's affected me as well, but that was probably the first domino.
Do you know what? It's really funny, isn't it? Because the whole theme of this season of the podcast is it only takes one person to make a
Mm,
difference in a young person's life. And you think university's probably not on your radar because you messed up, self-confessed, messed
yeah.
up grade levels. You weren't probably that interested at that time. You were earning money in Selfridges, which at that time must have just been amazing to work for anyway, just because
Unbelievable.
London, the whole works.
Yeah,
Um,
London in the 80s. Come on, you're bumping into pop stars all the time, serving famous people. It was incredible.
perfect job in your early 20s and stuff. So then Elaine, you get to know her. She's this character that you
Mm,
see and you already admire her. And then she just sees something in you. And I always think that, especially with young people, they either rise to expectations or they lower themselves to expectations. And her view of you was, what are you doing here? Why are you not at university almost? And you absolutely blossomed under that to
mm,
changing location, changing your life. Absolutely. How do you see Elaine saying that to you? How do you think that kind of part of her, how does that show up in you now? Having
mm,
her seen that in you,
mm.
does that affect you when you're with other people?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And I'm a coach, been practicing as a coach for 26 years now. And I think when you see yourself in other people, people who don't think they've got it in them, and let's face it, I went to university, and I will say this without any shame or correction, that actually some of the brightest people I know didn't go to university. And some of the least bright people I've ever met, I met when I was at university. And they were often people who'd gone through on the kind of, what do you call it, like the conveyor belt. They'd gone straight from school to A levels to university. And so and the fact that I'd been working for 10 years really did make a difference. And actually, my two best friends at uni were 10 years younger than me, but they'd also done a year out. And they were so different to the 18-year-olds, the 19-year-olds, very different. Anyway, that aside, I think this idea of helping people to see themselves more fully is really important, particularly, and I think in my case, I'd thought of myself, I'd constructed a worldview of myself as not being academic, okay? Not being someone who was capable of that kind of thing. Going out to work was actually great. And I loved being at work. And I did do personal growth type things. I did do a lot of management training. However, that's very different, a very different world to the world of university. And I'd always thought, again, I came from quite a lower middle class background, first person in my family to go to university. And although my parents are bright and did O levels as they were at the time, both of my parents are bright and quite erudite people. They didn't go to university. So there was no precedent. There was nobody in my family for whom university was the natural thing to do. So, whilst I don't necessarily advocate for people to go to university now, because I think life has changed and it's not the answer that it might have been at one point, I definitely think that I try and help people to see what they may not see themselves. And I've recently actually thinking about younger people, I've recently had the absolute privilege of working with some year sevens on confidence. Somebody that I met, again, you meet people, you have a conversation, you end up doing something. A bit like the Elaine thing, really. Somebody says, would you do this? And I say yes, because that's another thing. Saying yes to stuff has always been a bit of a thing for me. There's a book that was turned into a film called The Yes Man. And I think the book's much better than the film because the film was Hollywoodized, but basically it shows you what can happen in your life if you say yes to stuff. So anyway, I said yes to doing this stuff with year sevens and it's getting great feedback. I did it at a boys' school a couple of weeks ago and I just had some feedback last night that some of the words they used was inspirational, encouraging, and so on, which is absolutely fills my heart with joy because we've done an all girls school, we've done an all boys school, we're doing a mixed school in a couple of weeks' time, and then another girls' school. So helping them to see themselves, because let's face it, the education system doesn't always focus on the character and attributes that people have. It focuses on whether they're hitting the mark or whether they're hitting the exam results, whether they're hitting. And I think being able to get people to see themselves, the younger the better, is a passion for me to see what they're good at, to appreciate themselves, to learn to love themselves early in their lives so that actually, although this may be depriving me of people in my class later in life, actually to learn how to be confident early so that it doesn't hamstring you later in life and create imposter syndrome and create some of these things that I also support adults with. Yeah, and I firmly believe that one conversation can change the direction of your life. It's what we teach in Fierce Conversations. We say, no single conversation is guaranteed to change the trajectory of your life, but any single conversation can. So sit down beside someone you care about and begin. It's woven into my whole life, this idea of helping support people to see something that they may not see themselves. Yeah.
You know what? It's so lovely. Just that ripple effect, that little conversation. And for her, it might have been a throwaway comment,
Yeah.
but she's seen you. She's seen your intelligence. She's seen your drive. And actually, it's not only changed your life, but it's changed
Mm,
the way education. But you
mm.
clearly, even though formal education you didn't like, you clearly loved learning because you were doing
Yeah.
things your own back. Right. And obviously then went on to university as suggested. I just think it's so wonderful when somebody sees something in you you don't see
Mm,
yourself.
mm.
And how fantastic that you've gone on to do that. Tell us a little bit about the work that you and David do in PDA. You've just told us a little bit about
Mm.
work you do in schools. Tell us a little bit about what else PDA does.
Okay, so I would say in a nutshell, we teach leaders to have powerful conversations that help them to create motivated, accountable teams and get their results. To unpack that a bit, we teach them to be more influential. So lots of really clever people who know a lot of stuff and are probably quite senior don't know how to put it across in a way that actually shifts things. So we teach influencing skills. We're mediators, so we help people resolve conflict. We're coaches. We work with all sorts. I've worked with everyone from teenagers to people at the tail end of their careers, doing all sorts of things. My most it's not weird, but my most I like to quote this because it shows you that as a coach you don't have to know about the business in order to support somebody. So my best example of that is coaching the chief exec of the Nuclear Decommissioning Authority. And it's interesting. I was with a group of male coaches because we were coaching the whole board, and I was coaching the chief exec and a couple of his board members. And the men were all really anxious, had a lot of performance anxiety. The male coaches, whereas I was like, bring it on. I'm not, everybody knows I'm not an expert in the nuclear decommissioning field. So what am I here to do? I'm here to be an expert coach, not an expert in nuclear decommissioning. So anyway, so I've been a coach for a long time. What else do we do? Fierce Conversations, which is an amazing course that kind of compresses all the things that leaders should be up to on a daily basis into a fairly short course, 2 days. Absolutely transformational. We also have a leadership program that we wrote ourselves called Bear Leadership, BARE. And what that does is it helps to, the promise of Bear Leadership is do these things and you'll be a better leader tomorrow because not everybody has the time to spend like a year or 6 weeks or whatever it is, actually we've made it into a bite-sized program so that people can have digestible, current, fresh thinking about leadership. So for example, we talk about authenticity, vulnerability, we talk about humanity, allyship, we talk about things that aren't necessarily in standard leadership programs. Like we don't waste time talking about the difference between a manager and a leader, or using models from 1945 that are centered around the military. So we like to try and speak as, what are we facing here? What's the world like? What's the challenge of working with different generational groups,
Mm.
which actually connects some of the stuff that I do in schools, because I'm really interested in transitions. I'm interested in not just the transition between year 6 and year 7, and how do we help schools prevent that drop in attendance that happens halfway through year 7, but also the transition between secondary school and whatever further education people might go on to. And then, most importantly, the transition between, if they do go to university, uni and jobs, because all the evidence suggests that young people are going into the workplace with very little interpersonal skill. And this is probably a legacy of COVID and other things, screen based life, and no technical skills as well. So because you're a swiping generation, you don't know how to save a document in Word. And I haven't experienced this, but this is what I'm hearing. So supporting young people in developing those skills, but also supporting organisations. This is what I want to do: support organisations more in, how do we onboard people who are coming in from that generation, and not stand in judgment, but just say, what do you need? So some of those are passion projects of mine, and most of it is around helping people to have better conversations, really, in a nutshell.
What I'm hearing at the bottom end of that is 100% agree with the high school stuff and beyond. And I think you and I have spoken before about us when I was in Abu Dhabi, and we
Mm.
had kids coming back to the UK for university, and we had to teach them life skills because they just couldn't, because everything's been done for them.
Yeah,
Totally.
yeah.
One of the things that, and some research has come out lately, is that because we are not walking to school
Mm.
anymore, the very small micro elements that we get to build our own confidence with crossing the road,
Yeah.
speaking to the lollipop lady or man, the little building up that almost
Mm.
compound interest of confidence isn't
Mm.
there anymore.
Yeah.
They're not being able to stretch that. And so you imagine that at the other end of the school, it's no wonder we've got an anxious generation. It's I think really interesting to listen to you and then me on the other side. It's, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You can
It's
see why.
interesting. And I had this conversation with my daughter recently, with Ella, who's 26. And whilst she does have an older stepbrother who's 35, and they did live together for a period of time before he left home. But they were like two only children living in a house. So they got on really well, but they weren't close, like siblings, as in, because they weren't close in age. So what I'm saying is, essentially, she grew up like an only child, which meant she spoke to a lot of adults. She had a lot of adults around, adults talking to her. Her experience of doing that, I think, stood her in very good stead. Whereas I think teaching her to relate to adults, like her parents, as human beings as well, not just my parents, this entity. And then she got a part-time job in a shoe shop when she was 16. And it was she went round a lot of the shops looking for part-time work, Saturday jobs, as we used to call them. At the shoe shop was the only place that she went to. And David and I got in her face about doing an assessment centre, because they did that as part of and at 16, doing an assessment centre. And we helped her with that. We coached her a bit. Said, always speak up, make sure that you're showing up in this, because don't just sit there quietly thinking you're brilliant. You've got to show it. And anyway, so she got her job in shoe, and she worked there for a good 5 or 6 years, because when she was at uni in Liverpool, she transferred to the one at Liverpool One, and then she'd come back in the holidays and work at the one in Solihull, and she also worked at the one in Bullring for a little while in Birmingham. And so at 16, she was working with a multi-generational workforce. She had responsibility. She had performance management, because they were really good in shoe, in my opinion. She used to have monthly catch-ups with the manager, and they'd evaluate her performance and so on and so forth, reward her performance. And she has become a very confident young woman. And there's all sorts of other reasons why that might take place. But when I think about her generation, so she's Gen Z, one of the older Gen Zs. But when I think about the fact that employers are also saying that this generation isn't used to working or being around people of different generations. So they only want to work with their own generation. Whereas I think she's so comfortable working with people who of all different generations. I think she's got a brother and a sister-in-law who are millennials. Her dad's a Gen X, a mum's a boomer, a mum's husband's a boomer, a stepdad. So she's also interacting with all those different generational groups all the time. And we thought about it and I thought, A, it was good for her to work because I think a lot of young people these days aren't encouraged to get Saturday jobs or part-time jobs, or they can't. And so they go from school to college to uni out into the workplace before they've ever had a chance to experience what does working life feel like and look like. And even some of them, I'm hearing some of my friends' kids are really struggling with their mental health because they're also working from home. So they're isolated. Not only are they not working with people, but they're also working at home on their own. Yeah. So I think there's lots of challenges that these kinds of conversations, helping people with their confidence, can really help with. And I'm starting to notice that what I thought of as a side hustle, a passion project, something I do on a voluntary basis, which is work with confidence, is actually starting to seep in now to our corporate work. That we're recognizing that when I talk about it, people go, oh, I need that. I really need that. And you think, goodness, it's something that I think everybody should be doing more of. In fact, David and I, when we first started PDA, we used to joke about if you could eliminate all the names of all the courses. I'm sure I said this in a former podcast of our, that where we talked, but if we just called everything Be More Confident, Communicate Better, we'd nail it, basically. Never mind what you call your course. Those are the core things, aren't they?
I totally agree with you on the working. So I think just like we're talking about walking to school, I always say that after school stuff is really important to have another adult see you and see the skills that you have, or the gaps as well that you might have, and help you outside of your family network. But for me, working, getting that Saturday job, I worked for Greggs. My nana was
Mm,
a troubleshooter, and I worked for Greggs for a long time. And by the time I finished, I knew every single job in that shop.
yeah.
I could do the wages, I could do the
Mhm.
pasties, I could clean, I could do everything, serve, count the cash, the whole lot,
Yeah.
because she was a taskmaster, I'm going to be honest, but I never ever wanted for a job because I could always do it. And the oldest was probably in the 60s, do 1, 2 days a week. The youngest was,
Mm,
I was 14 when I started at Greg's.
amazing.
In the back. I wasn't allowed in the front because I wasn't 16 yet. But I
Mm,
used to go to work at 6 o'clock in the morning every Saturday with my nan.
yeah.
And yeah, I
And
think
getting up early, going to work at 6 o'clock in the morning.
you wanted your money.
Yeah.
And very fortunate that I was fortunate that A, I had that opportunity, but also B, over the road was a sports shop. And that
Mm,
sports shop had Reebok trainers in the window. And I
mm,
thought the first pay packet, like she used to give me a tenner every week, but when I first properly worked there and I worked in the summer, had my eye on those trainers, and I did exactly the same with my daughter when she started work. Your first pay packet, you can blow on what you want. After that, you start to save some. And I had my eye on these trainers
yeah.
for 3, 4 weeks in the summer. And I walked over with the cash in my little brown envelope and go, I want them. And it was that motivation that I had to get up early, to do
Mm,
the work. And also, my nana she was a taskmaster.
yeah.
There was no nepotism involved
No.
because she worked me harder so that others knew there was
Yeah.
no nepotism.
Yeah.
But it stood me in really good stead. And I think what that does is that's the equivalent of extracurricular, that walk into school. It's building those skills in a real life environment in every day that we don't often give those
Mm,
kids. And so I think as parents, quite often we're worried or we don't want them to do that or, oh, but actually we have to give them, it's an opportunity that's missed if we don't encourage them.
I think
Um,
so too. That risk averse.
Oh,
Risk-averse parenting. So we were out on our bikes as kids until it's the usual story. Although I'm boomer, I'm that youngest boomer, so my brothers are both Gen X, and we would hang around together with a bunch of ne'er-do-wells, feral, out in the countryside, riding non-roadworthy bikes around country lanes till it was dark, no mobile phones, etc., etc. And that kind of existence is it's precious. I think a lot of kids don't have that nowadays, and I don't want to turn this into a big old nostalgia fest for the 70s, but I think we have to find ways of letting our kids take risks. And I have to say this one thing, and again, I may have said this to you before, but I was in the woodcraft folk when I was a kid, and I got her into a local group of the woodcraft folk when she was about 6. I think that's the youngest you can get in. And there was an international camp and 2,000 people in a big field, a big kind of showground in Kent. And she said she wanted to go. And I said, yeah, great. Anyway, took her to the coach on day one. Off she goes. But what I realised as I put her on the coach was that the other young kids' parents were going with them. And she was the only one, age 6, who was going on her own because her mum hadn't thought that she needed. And so we had a camper van at the time and we did go and camp quite nearby just in case. But there she was, getting on stage, age 6, in front of 2,000 people and doing a dance to the Sugar Babes, apparently. And I did worry, but I only worried when I saw that the other parents were going with them. Other than that, I wasn't worried. And I'm not saying that I didn't have anxiety about her as a young child and as a teenager. And even now, living in Manchester and working in Moss Side, I still have anxieties, but you can't let that stop your children from learning how to be in the world and learning how to cope with adversity and becoming resilient, as you well know. Yeah.
I think it's really interesting what you've just said there, Sarah, because there's two things for me. One, you didn't think about it until you seen other parents. So for me, you already thought she's going to do brilliantly and she's going to
Yeah.
be great. So
It'll be all right.
it's only when you're thinking about, oh, actually, others are going that you thought about it because actually you had the faith in her and she could do it. And then the other thing is, which I find like quite really interesting, is that isn't it funny? Because you said, oh, I still had anxieties. Like even now, she's grown up, she's living in Manchester, working in my side. And actually, but they're yours. They're not yours that you're putting on her. Don't do it. Don't go.
Oh, God, no.
Are you safe? Blah, blah, blah. You're
No.
going, I still have them, but I have the trust in her. And that's really what this
Yeah.
podcast is all about, isn't it? In the fact
Yeah.
that you've had that faith in her that she can do anything, whether she's at 6 or whether she's now at a age
And
that,
she didn't do not quite the level. She did say she wanted to go to South America. And I'm dreading the fact that she might resurrect that because I didn't stop her. But anyway, she did go to Bali and to Australia on her own. She went to Barcelona and lived there for a little while on her own. So she's done that, which I think's amazing because I would just have taken somebody. I'd have made somebody come with me. And even though I'm a galloping extrovert, I would have probably and never have done that solo travel stuff. I'll go out for dinner on my own and go cinema on my own, which I know a lot of people of my age would never think of doing, but I do quite like doing stuff like that. But yeah, all that kind of solo travel thing, I think's amazing. I absolutely think. Isn't it lovely when you think your kids are better than you? It's like,
yeah,
she's better than me. She's more confident than me. She's done more risky things than I have ever have. And I think brilliant. Good for her.
yeah, absolutely. So just to come back to Elaine,
Yes, I have got another thing about her as well. Can we carry on?
go on, tell me, because I'll tell you the
Uh,
question and then you can
yeah,
decide
go on.
if you answer it now or afterwards. But what I was going to ask you was if you could say something to her now,
Mm, mm.
because my guess is she might know a little bit of the impact that she's had, but she might not know it all. What would you say? So either, but it's your choice. Tell me what you were going to tell
Yeah.
me, or and we can go
Okay.
that question.
It's funny because I'm seeing her next week because she's coming up here to Birmingham with her husband. But I think we have said stuff to each other because it was her birthday on the 1st of March. And I always post something that says, you're the most amazing. She's also, and this is a side issue really, she's the most amazing curator of experiences. So she lived in Sydney for a while and worked in Sydney. And I went over there for a couple of weeks to stay with her. And she curated the most fantastic holiday I've ever had. And when we go, she lives in Cornwall now. When we go to stay with her and Steve, we go to the best, and I don't mean the finest, but sometimes they are the finest, but the best places to eat. the best museums, the best places to visit. She puts it together with such care and thought and love and generosity. And she knows that because I literally call that all the time. And I haven't spoken to her about the university thing, but I think I will talk to her about how that changed my life. The other thing that I do appreciate her for, which is something I will now say to her as well, is that she almost, I would say, single handedly got me to be a more critical thinker. And I would say that she did English and psychology at university. I did psychology, but she is one of life's natural. She's a feminist. She's a sociologist. She's got a master's in management learning, but she's also got a master's in diversity and equity and obviously a PhD. And she one of the first things, she was a kind of not critical in a really aggressive way, but critical of coaching and the expansion of coaching into the world of management, because her thing is management and management learning. And I said to her, look, why you don't have to have a coach? I'm getting a bit defensive. Like, why don't you think anything of coaching? And she helped me to see the increasing psychologization of management and so on, and just seeing it as the individual, which was a very Thatcherite thing to think as well. Get on your bike, go find work, your family, it's the individual. So translating that into kind of the psychologization of skills development and achievement and so on, this idea that anyone can do anything and society around you has no impact is a faulty way of thinking. But it was certainly the way that psychology was put across, that it was way before psychology became a bit more eclectic, and the way that psychologists and sociologists might actually talk to each other a bit more now. So absolutely thank her for making me think in a more rounded way about learning and development and people's growth and so on, and thinking about that the system is so important, as well as what the individual might be willing to do or not do. So there was that. And by the way, I said to her, why is it that you focus so hard on the sociological aspects of things? And she said, somebody's got to. And she's also the person that I go to amongst other people, because she's a white middle class woman as well. I'm aware of the fact that we don't hold the truth about diversity, but because she studies it and she's so good in that arena, I would run things by her, because I do some DEI stuff. I did a thing about governance and bringing allyship into governance last week, actually, in a conference. But yeah, so the idea of so that level of critical thinking, as well, as I have to thank her for that, as well as thanking her for being the most brilliant curator of experiences. And she is super generous on a personal level as well, I would say, because I grew up with a single parent mother, and I think I've always felt a bit awkward about receiving. Have a be strong driver. Don't let people do things for you, because it's awkward. And because of her generosity, I think she's taught me as well, unconsciously, to learn how to accept graciously, and to let people gift you generously, and to let people curate those experiences and just be super, super giving and generous. And I think it's also, so I wasn't brought up to think that I had a right to be looked after. And she's one of the people that has looked after me as well, looked after me, taken care of my needs, done nice things. And I think that's something that I had to learn to accept as well. You can imagine what a wonderful person she is to have in your life,
Oh, I think we all need an Elaine. And I just want to
don't we?
thank her as well, because the person you are, the person that you're describing, I see that in you. The minute I met you online first, and you were just inspirational, from your glasses that you wore to the kind of things that you spoke about, to the allyship, to the having brave conversations, and not seeing that almost as that's just a skill. Like, it's not a confrontation, it's a negotiation, it's a skill that you can learn and anyone can. And just how passionate you are about young people.
Mm.
I think she's definitely shaped some of the Sarah that I know, and I'm very thankful for.
Oh, that's lovely.
Um,
Yeah.
Sarah, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I feel like we need to get this out so that you could send a link to
Yes.
Elaine for sure. But I just want to thank you, because not only have you shared your story about Elaine and the impact that she's had on your life and the ripple effects of that, but actually you have impact on lots of young people's lives. I go into schools sometimes after you and know already they're still talking about you and you've probably not been there for 4 years delivering. Yeah, I just wanted to say, as a person who makes a difference in my life, thank you.
Oh, thank you. And back at you as well. I'm so grateful to have met you, and I will always say yes to anything you ask me.
Yeah.
Always, because it's a joy. It really is. It makes my life better. So thank you as well. Thank you. I can't wait to work together in Womanifest. Yeah.
Yeah, but we'll just finish off by saying so teen tickets are on sale for Will Manifest. We are hosting the tent. There is like an arts and crafts tent and stuff that they can do there, but we're doing the work. We bring your teen if, they want. Sarah's going to do a confidence and a body positivity workshops. We're also going to do a workshop run by Heather, who's going to do red flags in relationships and what young female teen doesn't need that kind of stuff, even if it's relationships with their mates. It doesn't have to be around partner relationships. We're going to do lots of work on resilience. It's going to be lots of fun. There's going to be lots of work to be done. They're going to go away with learning and hopefully feeling held as well by the end of the weekend. Sarah will be there both days. Whoop. To kind of party as well. So yeah, thank you for listening today. Sarah, thank you as ever for joining us. I really appreciate you.
And vice versa. Thank you.
So I've just been listening back to the podcast with Sarah, and what I love about it is that it reminds us that it doesn't take those huge moments or being a perfect parent, perfect teacher. Sometimes it's just one person showing up consistently that changes everything for a child, for a teen, for a fully grown adult. And that's really at the heart of what we do here at the Resilient Kid. We're building a community of people who want to be that person for children, for teens, and in more places. So if you're listening and something in this conversation has resonated with you, and if you've ever felt that pull to make a difference, not just in your own family, but in your community, then that's exactly why we created the Resilient Kid franchise. Get in touch, link below.